see the list of people on here, I do know, I think we've met everyone, but I would like to take an opportunity to introduce Layla Hassani, who is our new co-chair, joined from BP M&A team. And we have also Rebecca Mason-Graham, who works for Wood PLC, and she is our representative in Dubai. So we'll do some brief introductions and then we'll talk through the agenda.
Great. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's Layla here. As Sami said, I am an M&A lawyer in the BP team. And I'm very passionate about Iraq. Lucky living in London that we have lots of opportunity for arts and culture and seeing the Iraqi heritage play out. But as I say, working in BP, the reason I actually joined BP was I had an opportunity to, when I first joined, work with the Rumaila field, which, as many of you will know, is one of the largest fields in the world. It accounts for just under 50% of Iraq's GDP. So for the number of years that I worked there, it was a real privilege to get to work in and with Iraqis, and it was the first time I managed to go to Iraq was with work, and I went many times to Basra, and that's how I came to know about IBBC and Amar Foundation, because BP has a very long-standing and close relationship with the organizations, and of course with the yen, it's an opportunity now that I'm not working directly with Iraq in my day-to-day job to still kind of explore and pursue my passion of supporting Iraq. So I'm very happy to be here and privileged to kind of be part of the network.
Hi, as Sami's introduced me already, I'm Rebecca. I work as a senior project engineer for Wood, which is, if you've not heard of it, an oil and gas services company. I've spent the last 6 years working on various Iraq projects. Most recently, the Basra Gas engineering and procurement contract, which we were basically tasked with getting 5 sites around Basra, gas processing sites, back up and running. Many of these sites hadn't actually been running for in excess of 10 years, or they'd been damaged through the years of unrest. My involvement with IBBC came about during one of my monthly visits to our Iraq engineering office. And it became apparent to me, whilst I was well aware of the fact further education was not guaranteed for every child, it only was then that it dawned on me that many females, young girls, were not actually aware that it was an option for them or that they could have a career. So that's when I had a network of young females working for us in various roles in Wood in Iraq. So using that network, we actually arranged a number of school visits to educate these young girls about their potential choices after primary school, their careers and potential in oil and gas or in other industries. So yeah. That's really where my involvement with IBBC comes in. I'm hoping I can encourage more of you to get involved with similar activities in Iraq and spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. So we'll just pull up the slide deck and we'll talk through the agenda and then we'll rattle through it. And we'll open up the floor for Q&A afterwards as well. So we welcome questions and feedback and suggestions. You can see there, that's one of our events with BP at the British Museum. So the agenda, we'll talk through at a high level some of the key challenges and opportunities that have come off the back of the COVID-19 crisis. We're going to refresh our core pillars for those of you who are either new to the network or have not seen them. And then we'll talk through our plan for the year ahead and how that ties into our core pillars and obviously how we've responded to the COVID-19 crisis, and as well as open up the floor for Q&A. So, I think there are a few sectors, industries, and economies which aren't severely impacted both in a positive or negative way by COVID-19, whichever way you look at it. We know that we're in the midst of what many are calling the deepest recession in peacetime history. And close to home in the UK, we've seen about 20% contraction in GDP. And if you can see the bottom right the graph on the slide deck, that's almost in line with 2002 levels. So you've seen quite a significant wipeout of GDP from this crisis. Unfortunately, unemployment figures are not looking good in the US. You've got a negative reduction of about 8 to 10% unemployment, 5 to 6% in the UK, with the Eurozone faring slightly better between -3 and 3.5%. And all of this translates into reductions in investment and productivity. So the real net productive investment in the median OECD economy is was forecast at 5% of GDP pre-crisis, and around 2 to 3.5% of GDP through 2020. So quite a significant reduction in investment following on. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. We are seeing recovery projections. We're seeing early signs of recovery in Asia and Europe and in the US to some degree. So many of you would have seen V-shaped recovery, U-shaped, L-shaped. We won't get into the details of that today, but hopefully we are on some trajectory for recovery. And obviously we've seen environmental benefits through reduction in carbon emissions from around the world. We've seen reduction in pollution in major cities. So it's been a good way for us to rethink the way the world is structured and how we operate. We're seeing social benefits in how people work and new ways of working from home, and communities coming together to support each other through the crisis. And interestingly, obviously, is the digital transformation tech boom. And the platform that we're on, obviously, has seen a 2,000% increase in users since this time last year. So Leila now is going to talk about some of the challenges that the oil and gas sector is facing and what that means for Iraq.
Thanks, Sami. Yes, I think Brent is hovering around the $40 price mark, but at the height of lockdown, most of you will be aware that oil price slumped to kind of around $15 a barrel, and WTI in the US even went into negative pricing. So clearly a very challenging environment for the sector. Those prices weakened really sharply almost overnight, with oil activity effectively around the world dropping off a cliff, but with a glut of supply, coupled with the COVID-19 environment and that lack of demand, was a sort of dispute between Saudi Arabia and Russia on OPEC, and a disagreement around cutting the production around the world. And so what that then meant was that supply continued to fill up in storage, and has depressed the price even further. We've obviously now seen some solutions around that, and that will play out, but it will take quite a long time for the stocks to even out, and therefore for the price to balance out. And you know, with that, as Sami mentioned, you know, the sort of impact on the environment and the sort of, particularly in Europe, the discussion around climate change, I think this environment has only accelerated the discussion that we are seeing on the energy transition. BP is one of those companies that has set out a new ambition on the energy transition and how we see the future playing out in the energy market. But there are many, many companies that are doing the same, and clearly that's an opportunity for new types of technologies, new jobs. It's obviously uncertain, but with that uncertainty does come opportunity. But what does that mean for Iraq? Well, this is an unprecedented challenge for Iraq. Iraq, as many of you will know, is probably the most dependent country in the world on its oil and gas industry, and more than 60% of its GDP is accounted for by the oil and gas industry. Something like 92% of the government's total revenues come from oil and gas sector, and 99% of its exports come from the oil and gas sector. In order for Iraq to balance its books, it needs to have, it assumes an oil price of $60 a barrel, which, given what we've just been talking about, is clearly way off the mark and presents a very, very big problem for its budget. So these external shocks are really quite problematic for the country. And as we all know, there have been many protests over the last few months around the lack of basic services, unemployment, corruption, you name it. There has been a number of and myriad of issues. And what I would take a moment to highlight is that the Advisory Council for the IBBC has written a paper to the Iraqi government setting out these challenges, but also some of its recommendations of solutions. So it's a paper entitled Iraq 2020, A Country at the Crossroads. And I'd really encourage you to read that paper. There was actually a webinar on Monday, which was recorded and I think would be available to watch. But some of the recommendations that paper alludes to is engagement of Iraqi people. Mustafa just mentioned it earlier, but also a sort of development and reform of the banking and investment sector, because that is really problematic. There is no faith in the banking system. There is a major lack of investment. So there needs to be huge reforms there. And likewise, a regulatory reform. So doing business in Iraq is incredibly difficult. As a lawyer, I know how difficult that regime is. And so in order to encourage in foreign investment, internal investment, there needs to be a reform of that. So, you know, there is plenty of opportunity that can come out of these challenges, and part of this network is supporting Iraq and businesses to try and work through those opportunities, and in particular to just really develop a private sector, which Iraq really needs.
So now going back to our core pillars, which we use to anchor most of our decisions and initiatives around. The first is to connect, and obviously we want to create a platform to connect like-minded entrepreneurs, executives from a range of industries and sectors. So we've created that platform, and we want to facilitate as much interaction between the network. The second is to support. So we want to offer various means of support to our network to get ahead in careers, to get ahead in business, to get ahead in entrepreneurship. So we will talk a little bit about the initiatives that we're looking at the moment. And the third is to give back to Iraq. And I think many of us have been fortunate enough to work for large corporations around the world and have had first-class education. And we'd like to use this as an opportunity to give back to Iraq. So we'll talk about these three initiatives in later slides.
So on Unconnect, we really want to leverage off this network to create meaningful connections, sharing in our passion for Iraq, for some of us, our heritage and within the diaspora, and really help to work with Iraq and to support its future. Some of you may have attended some of our face-to-face networking events in the past, which have been really successful. Clearly, we'd like to do those again when the COVID-19 social distancing restrictions have loosened and we have that opportunity. So that is certainly in our future. But for now, leveraging off the technology that we have, and hopefully you'll have found this webinar useful, what we're intending to roll out is a program of online speakers and really what we're looking for is prominent Iraqis, Iraqi diaspora, or people working in Iraq, whether they're entrepreneurs, executives, academics, creatives, to speak about their experiences working in Iraq, or just some of the business and experiences that they've had. So we're really fortunate. We've already lined up a couple of speakers who are very happy to get involved. So some of you may know them. Philip Juma is the founder and head chef of Juma Kitchen. He's had supper clubs around London for many years, but recently opened a stall at Borough Market. And during this very difficult COVID-19 time, he has donated a lot of time and effort to support the NHS with meals. So I think it'll be fantastic to hear from him. And then Alia Safar is a MENA program manager at the International Energy Agency. So completely understands the economics of the impact of oil and gas sector in Iraq, the need for the development of the private sector, and again, a very interesting speaker. So we'll be looking to roll out many other people. We're looking for diverse backgrounds and people. So if you, I sort of reach out to the network, that if you've got people in mind that you think would be great to hear from, do let us know. We are very much open to those ideas. And I guess lastly, in terms of Connect, the purpose, as I say, of this network is for us all to connect and to kind of to reach out with each other. So we like to see the network as a sort of living and breathing and growing network. So again, think about the people that you know of that may be interested in this network, and request and ask them to become members as well, because it's for the benefit of everyone to build our networks and to share in I think this shared passion that we have for Iraq and its future. I'll hand back over to Sami now to speak to the next slide.
Thank you, Leila. So tied to Connect, many of you would have seen that we have a private LinkedIn group. We currently have about 136 members on there. We welcome you to request to join if you haven't already done so. And that's going to be kind of our primary means of communicating. We also have a mailing list as well, but it's a good way to see who is in the network and be able to reach out directly to them. So we do welcome anyone to join. So the first initiative for support is business introductions. And I think this is important in times like this, particularly when there is reduced investment and activity. It's important for us to reach into our networks. Of course, the IBBC has an extremely large network of large corporations. And within our group, we have executives and entrepreneurs who are working with those types of organizations. So we are happy to facilitate introductions. A recent example of this is a company called Cross Boundary Capital. It's an advisory firm. They reached out to us. They have a program in Iraq, I think funded by USAID, providing SMEs and startups with funding and business advice. I think extremely important for the Iraqi ecosystem, tech ecosystem, to be able to access capital. And these guys are pros. They've done this all over the world, and they're focusing their attention on Iraq. Based on earlier discussions with Mustafa, this is obviously a key challenge. So anything along those lines, we're happy to support. We're happy to promote. If you do want to promote a service line or thought leadership, feel free to get in touch with us. We'll do that. We'll be able to connect you with the right people. Or you're more than welcome to just post it on the LinkedIn group, and you'll have a large audience of about 140 people. So that's the business introductions. The second initiative that we're really focusing on now is the jobs portal. So one of the biggest challenges we always face is making sure that we get the right people for the role, and going through traditional recruitment routes can be costly, it can be time consuming, and we find that they generally fall short of what we're really looking for. So if you are someone who is looking to recruit a role, please feel free to get in touch with us. We will post that role on our jobs portal. That will make its way onto our LinkedIn group, and we'll send out a monthly email with available roles. And obviously on the flip side, if you are looking for a new role or a new job, feel free to get in touch, and then we'll be able to make the introduction. So those are the two main initiatives that we're looking at for support at the moment. And now we'll talk about giving back to Iraq and what we can do. So Rebecca's spoken briefly about the STEM initiative. Rebecca, would you like to just give a little bit more on how others can support us with this, and what the plans are to kind of scale this once we have the opportunity to get back into Iraq, and once things are operational again, and the types of schools that you've been working with?
Yeah, sure. So as I touched on earlier, using a small network of young females in oil and gas that I had, which were originally only wood employees, but then towards the latter end of 2019, we did actually have some people out with wood, which was great as we were starting to expand the network. The vision was never just it to be a wood exclusive network. It was for anyone interested in educating young females in Iraq. So I had a group of about 20 young females that work for Wood in various engineering, HR, recruitment positions. So we had a really varied group of young, enthusiastic females. We arranged a number of school visits to the same local school for girls in Basra. The girls were of primary school age, and there was about 50 of them. And we did a number of visits where the girls from the network, the young ladies, would go and speak to the school children about their life after school, primary school, high school, going to university, and also they talked to them a bit about their careers in oil and gas. In addition to that, we also tied it in with topics on safety and green topics as well. So for example, one of the things we engaged the school children on was a driving safety poster competition. So we ended up with an excess of about over 50 posters created by these children about their take on driving safety, which was great. They'd obviously gone home and got their brothers and sisters involved and all of that. So the impact was actually a lot bigger than what we thought it would be. And then we used those posters, we displayed them around the office, which was really touching for our employees and at our sites as well. And we also turned it into calendars to help raise awareness to our workforce in Iraq, because for us as well, driving safety was one of our, in fact, I think it was probably our biggest safety risk last year. So there was a lot of focus on that. So being able to reach out and engage the school children on that was really special. And that was in addition, obviously, to educating them about the possibilities and just opening their eyes to what their future could look like, and that it might be different to what they've actually been brought up to think. So like for me, there was like 3 key drivers behind getting this initiative off the ground, and the primary one was that I really wanted to try and make a difference in educating these young girls to the future possibilities for them, so that they could hopefully follow similar paths as the girls that we had working with us. And then in addition to that, as being part of Wood, we have 60,000 employees worldwide. So social responsibility is a big thing for us. But when I started working in Iraq, I think it was put in the too difficult box for a lot of people. They didn't really know how to approach it. And then in addition to that, I was also involved as part of my role in training and development of employees. And for me, it became quite apparent that we couldn't just be starting from when we take on graduates or mid-level position locals. We really needed to start reaching out to the younger generation. So they were the 3 driving factors for me. And then just going back to the being put in a too difficult box, obviously it is quite difficult. I was never allowed to actually travel to the schools. It just simply wouldn't have been allowed. So I had to leave that part of it up to our network, which they did a fantastic job of. But actually when it came down to it, it was actually relatively easy for us to organise, and there was very little cost associated with it. So for our company, the cost basically came down to the cost of the car for the 4 girls. We would put four girls for each school visit, and then also the cost of their time for the day. And because of the nature of the work that we do, normally our client pays for our hours basically. And they're not really normally up for paying for things that don't have a deliverable for them. So that was a Wood cost, but it was relatively a small cost and easy for me to get approved. Unfortunately, I've not been able to get into Iraq since October last year due to the increased frequency and security events. It just simply wasn't possible, and that's also meant that our school visits have come to a halt. And then now we've got restricted work going on in Iraq, the impact of COVID, of borders are closed and all the rest of it. We all know the situation. So it's not been possible to arrange any visits this year. As soon as things are back to some sort of normality, it would be great to get some more of these up and running. I'm happy to give anyone advice that's thinking they might like to do the same in their company or If anyone's interested, you can also contact me. I'd be happy to keep you in the loop with our plans. It is just in Basra we operate due to where our work is. But yeah, I'm happy to provide advice to anyone that's interested.
Thank you, Rebecca. Obviously a fantastic initiative, and hopefully once things start to reopen soon, we'll be able to pick this up and promote it and scale it as much as possible. So thank you very much for giving the overview. Layla will now give an overview on Amar Foundation.
Thanks, Sammy. So Amar Foundation, hopefully most of you have heard of it, but it's been working in areas of conflict and instability for more than 25 years. So it has a very big presence in supporting Iraq. It's helped with the Marsh Arabs in Iraq, and under some of its the pressures that it faced during and post Saddam Hussein's era. But the sort of core principles for Amar are responding to crises, rebuilding the community, and restoring self-sufficiency. So it's been involved in lots of programs such as healthcare provision, particularly for internally displaced peoples. With the effects of ISIS, particularly in the north of Iraq, and the number of displaced people, Amar's work in that area has been absolutely fundamental in supporting that community. I know from my work with BP, we have social investment programs that we work on regularly, and Amar Foundation is one of the partners that we've worked with to build like football pitches for some of the local community in Basra, working on medical center provisions. So an array of fantastic work. A recent piece of work that Amar Foundation has been working on is with the Yazidis, again from northern Iraq, obviously a very small minority group that has been very badly affected by ISIS. And it has a very long-standing heritage of traditional music, which typically has always been passed on orally. It's never been written down. And so Amar has been working with those people to try and capture and store and protect that tradition, which is obviously a wonderful thing to try and capture and keep in place some of Iraq's heritage. So again, as part of the network, we really want to promote the activity of Amar Foundation and to try and get involved and support where we can. So again, look out for some of those initiatives as we kind of move forward.
Thank you, Layla. Yeah, just pre-COVID-19, we were planning a supper club dinner to raise money for Amar Foundation. Unfortunately, obviously, we can't do that now for the time being, so we will continue to support virtually as best we can, but and hopefully when things start to reopen again, we'll be able to pick that initiative up. And finally, we'll talk about the mentoring and internships initiative that Layla has carried out throughout her career. Layla has been very heavily involved in mentoring young Iraqis from around the world. Layla, would you like to just give a very brief overview on some of the work that you've done?
Sure. So both within BP, as I went regularly to Rumaila, I would work with some of the Iraqis there and try to help them with, particularly in my field in law, so some of the training and just kind of discussing sort of career opportunities and how best to help them. But then also more broadly, I'm a mentor for a student at Queen Mary University London on the LLM program and have been for the last couple of years. And I really see the benefit of mentorship. I've been a mentee also within BP. We have a very large mentoring program there as well. And so I'm a very big advocate for that. And I think what we would like to roll out, and we'll start small initially and hopefully grow from there, is to connect people from our network to be mentors with hopefully Iraqi students, potentially those just coming from Iraq to study in the UK. But we're really looking at sort of growing that pool and trying to connect. And this is a way of giving back and helping guide them through their careers, help them with their CVs, help them understand how businesses are operating, the global context. for many years, some of the outside, understanding how business operates in other countries outside of Iraq is something of a bit of an unknown. And I've seen that with, I've had a student in Mexico. She was the same. She asked me lots of questions because she didn't quite understand how things worked in the UK or the US. So it's a really good relationship builder. It's a really good way of giving insight to those students. I think it's just a fantastic opportunity to give back. So we'll be hoping to roll out that program in the coming weeks. And I'd really encourage you to volunteer to be a mentor. And of course, if you'd also like to be involved in actually setting up the program, we will be looking for volunteers as well.
Thank you, Leila. And finally, you've all probably heard that capacity building, capability building is high up on the agenda in Iraq. Sorry, Emma, can we just go back to one last slide? Thank you. You can see in the image here, we have Ali, a young engineer who works for Turner & Townsend with Shell and Majnoon. And I've also seen that Andy Dakin, who was heading up our commission in Iraq with Shell, is on the line. Andy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but are you able to give us a very quick overview of your work with Ali and how we were able to get him chartered at Turner & Townsend? Unfortunately, he's not on the line anymore. However, I can give an overview. I was involved in the project. So we looked at bringing in the RICS, which is the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, into Iraq, and this is a very important part of bringing in international best practice and standards to bring up the next generation of Iraqi leadership. And Ali is the first chartered surveyor in Iraq, and that was really big news for us because obviously this is showing the right path to capacity building and localization, and Leila could probably testify that this is a very important thing for companies like BP and Shell in Iraq, and we want to continue building on that as much as possible to give young, talented Iraqis the opportunities to work with large corporations and to become the next generation of leadership. So we are looking at formalizing an internship program, potentially for Iraqis outside who are studying outside of Iraq, because visas and sponsorship can be very challenging for getting people from within Iraq to travel globally. But again, if we do ask the network, if you do have any internship opportunities, please do feel free to let us know, and we'll be able to collect the right candidates with them and hopefully continue building on some of the good work that's already been done in Basra. And now I welcome some questions for Q&A. We've got another 3 minutes. I'm happy to stay on longer if everyone's available, but more than happy to take any questions. I believe you need to put your hand up, and then Emma will be able to unmute your mics if you have any questions. Alex, you're on mute.
Hi, Alex.
Let's take another question until we can get Alex.
Yeah, if you're struggling, Alex, you can write the question in the chat box and we can try and answer it from there.
Andy's back.
Hi guys, sorry I dropped off for a few minutes there. Great chat, firstly, enjoyed that.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, one thing I had, Leila, I know you touched on it in terms of, COVID's obviously an awful thing, but once we get to the other side, hopefully there are going to be some positives that come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
As a group, the three of you, have you got any thoughts on what you think are going to be some of the key things that are likely to happen, or you think that needs to happen in Iraq as a result of this?
I mean, certainly from my perspective, it's been needed for quite some time. I don't think Iraq has really ever recovered from the sort of oil price crash that we had in 2014, 2015, I think things have just compounded over time. I think now the sort of the twin challenges of the major external environment, massive external environment that's been going on, and also the internal challenges, I think it has to be the time that there is reform and there is change. I think balancing the budget is going to be incredibly difficult, and there are some very difficult decisions that need to be made. But I do think that that's where sort of foreign investment is foreign investment and foreign help, but also helping the country in itself reform to allow itself to kind of grow. And Mustafa talked about those challenges, and those are faced day in and day out. So the structure around the banking system, investment, the regulatory environment, those really need to be reformed. So I personally would like to see some of the regulation being changed. And I think the problem that we've had today is that often, the petroleum law in Iraq has also taken years and has never been passed. There needs to be a breakdown of some of the bureaucracy to actually push forward. And I think we're at a time where things can't procrastinate any longer. I'd like to see that precipitating into real change. And I'm hopeful that the country is almost forced to do that now, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think these drastic times are, very few people are benefiting right now, but we'd like to think that it's forcing decisions and forcing the change that needs to happen. Just to add briefly, I know we're short of time, but from our side, Ali, who's still doing great, is one of our TNT guys. Sorry, I just caught the last of what you spoke about with how he's getting on in Iraq. Yeah. Obviously, as a company, we're struggling a bit in Iraq. With the expats have left, but on the flip side, a lot of the Iraqis that we have now have the opportunity to step up, and there's great opportunity for these guys that are on the ground to progress within the business, and it is pushing that Iraq localization. So we do see some benefits for the country in terms of, hopefully in the long run we'll start seeing some of these guys coming through and being the future and the managers.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly is an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Few questions from Ali. We've got first is how often do the meetings like these take place? Initially, we were having obviously some challenges with the physical meetings because there's a lot of organization that goes into it. There's securing a venue, there's getting everything organized for it, all the speakers lined up. So our frequency wasn't as often as we would like. However, with being able to do these via Zoom, there's absolutely no reason why we can't increase the frequency now. And we haven't actually set the intervals that we'd like to work with, but we'll probably look at something once a month, particularly with our first Connect initiative with our speaker series. So getting those up and running is a priority. So we'd like to start those as soon as possible and get those running as frequently as possible. And then of course, we're more than happy to hold any other industry-specific events that people would like to raise. We've got a very diverse group of people from the oil and gas sector, from finance, from entrepreneurship, from law. So we can go into more focus sessions as and when required. So if anyone would like to focus on a particular panel or a particular roundtable discussion, we're more than happy to facilitate that and get the right people in. So do feel free to reach out. Are there any ongoing? Sorry, Leila,
I think also the cadence will very much depend on participation. So we're hoping that some of the programs that we are launching will drive interest, and I think that will dictate sort of the cadence as well. Absolutely.
Are there any ongoing active projects that the IBBC is working on to help give back to Iraq? So the three that we've mentioned are the main ones that we've got at the moment, obviously hampered by the COVID-19 crisis purely because we're quite limited logistically with what we're able to do. We're going to run those as best we can virtually, but waiting for things to pick up and then be able to really ramp up, particularly with the STEM initiative, because that requires people on the ground and people traveling to Iraq. So see how we can, but there's not to say that we can't do a lot of the legwork and groundwork to prepare for that. during this phase.
Yeah, and I guess I would add that this is this is everyone's network. So if there are ideas, if there's an initiative that you think would be well suited to the network, please feel free to suggest them, and we can obviously look to try to roll it out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the third question from Alex is, does the IBBC have representation members that are currently in the Iraqi government or regulatory bodies? Yeah, I mean, the IBBC is a government-to-government platform and organization. The Young Executives Network is not. It's more of a, it's more of a person-to-person, professional-to-professional network. So we don't have within our network many from the Iraqi government or regulatory bodies. However, the IBBC is well connected with the Prime Minister's office, and perhaps I'll give an opportunity to Richard to be able to give a little bit of an overview at high level some of the work that the IBBC is doing with the latest white paper, Iraq at a Crossroads, as well as the engagement that they're having with the Iraqi government and major multinationals.
Can you hear me all?
Yes, loud and clear. Thanks, Richard.
Oh, excellent. Right. Well, we are a totally independent body, and we are only financed through our members' fees and other things we do. So we work closely with both the UK government and the Iraqi government, but we are independent of them. Yeah, again, one or two of you have mentioned the paper we've just produced, where we've come up with, I guess, a review of the challenges, and we've tried to put forward some solutions. They have a lot of challenges. I think, which is a real worry, and we just wonder whether the government has almost the capacity. Where do they start? I think that's one of the big issues. But yeah, we keep talking to government, and I think it's going to be slowly. They work through these problems, but somehow the Iraqi government has got to engage with the people, and somehow they've got to communicate what they want to do to the people, and the people have got to buy in. To buy into some of these solutions. I guess pensions, civil service salaries and pensions, is one of their biggest problems. And, and are Iraqi civil servants going to vote, be like Turkey's voting for Christmas? Are they going to vote for reduced salaries and reduced pensions? That is possibly one of the top 10 problems for the government. So yeah, we just keep engaging, talking, and working with our members. We hope we can bring some influence to bear on these Iraqi institutions, but we do not underestimate the challenges.
Thank you, Richard. We have another question from Amar Diwani saying, could you elaborate on what Yen's involvement is and what its work is currently being done with Cross Boundary? So. Cross Boundary reached out to the IBBC, and Richard kindly introduced us to them. We have not actually done any work with them yet. They've joined our network. So Jessica Howe is the founder, and she runs the program in Iraq. So we're working with Jessica to introduce her to as many companies that could potentially require their services as possible. So it is a relatively new introduction, but one that we're willing to support and one that we're willing to introduce to as many people as possible.
Yeah, and I can add just a little bit of color because I've made the introduction to BP, so I've spoken to Jessica a number of times. But essentially, they're sort of an advisory service, so sort of akin somewhere between an investment bank and a management consultancy. So they provide investment advice. They're typically looking at companies that are looking for debt or equity funding, typically around $500,000. That's kind of the sort of the base that they're looking at for that kind of an investment, where the company is looking for that level of investment. They have a couple of forms that sets out a bit of information about cross-boundary, and if there are companies that might fit that criteria, to fill out the form, and it can be sent for them to look at. And then if they think that there's a match there, then they will have a meeting and kind kind of discuss that to see if they do match the criteria. So we will, after this session, we can upload those forms for you to just find out a little bit more about cross-boundary, and if there is either someone within your organizations that you can put in touch with Jessica, then obviously we encourage that.
Thank you, Leila. One from Mustafa, great to meet you all. Thank you for your time. If there's any insight from working in Iraq you would like from me, please feel free to get in touch, and we'll share his contact details with the group beyond that. So thank you very much, Mustafa, and we wish you the best of luck, and we'll happy to support you in any way that we can. One from Hassan Al-Khaddar. Could there be some cross-network events with other Iraqi networks based in the UK, e.g. Al-Kindi, so that we could grow our base? Absolutely. I think so. Al-Kindi are a society of engineers, and I think it would definitely be worthwhile reaching out to them if for other related, engineering-related events or roundtables. And if anyone does have any other groups that they're involved with, do feel free to let us know, and then we'll be able to reach out. And the more the merrier with this group, and we need to get as many people involved as possible and continue building engagement. And with that will come collaborating with other networks. So yeah, please feel free to let us know if there is anyone else that you think we should work with. And that's it. A few thanks, and thank you all very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Please do feel free to send any questions you may have offline. We're happy to answer them. And also a big thank you to the IBBC, Richard and Emma, for their continued support to our network. It is really appreciated, and we hope that despite the many challenges that we're all facing at the moment, that we'll be able to come together as a network and pull through it and hopefully emerge stronger than before. So thank you very much, and I look forward to meeting in person sometime soon, but otherwise we'll continue our virtual interaction. So thank you all very much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.